There we are. There's our audio and our, look at that. See, we just had to update our OBS, which is the reason for the late start. And the end result of that, of course, is all of my stuff gets reset. But anyway, here we are. I hope everyone can hear me. If you are on the YouTube and you cannot hear me, please let me know. Wait, that wouldn't work for you, huh, now, would it? Well, anyway, let me get this docked properly. Okay, there we are. I was not expecting that. You know, I tell you, no good podcast survives first contact with technical difficulties. All right, here we are. See, I can't even see the live stream on YouTube, but either way, neither here nor there. It looks like you folks should be able to see me here in the Discord. This should also be streaming to YouTube, and it looks like it's working just fine. And YouTube sees the really awesome Mets map that was created by, let's see here, by James. And I want to show this off to you because this is just an absolutely beautiful map. As you know, I'm a big fan of the Mets map. Um, Part of it is it's a meme in the IKS, but the other part of it is it's just a really cool map. You have a variety of terrain. You've got these hills and mountains. You've got a river that runs across it, creating a number of strategic crossings that have to be managed. You have a variety of really interesting terrain like these vineyards that are also good barriers to movement. You have small villages. You have the city of Metz. Let's see here. You have this little castle here, Prayel. I love this little fortified farmstead, Prayel here. It's a really cool spot for meeting engagements and other things like that. So I just have a good time on this map. It is pretty neat. And so I just wanted to throw that out there and give some kudos to James for his work on this map, or whoever did the work on his behalf. I don't know if he did the work or if he got someone else to do it for him like I do. But in any case, James did a really good job at bringing this to the table. It's a pretty nice map, and I had fun playing on it. Okay, let's talk about today's topic. Now, today's topic is going to sound a lot like last week's topic, and that's for a very simple reason, and that's because last week we had some technical issues that essentially torpedoed the podcast in the middle. And so I said that I would repeat the podcast this week. So I'm going to get into that, and I'm going to talk about some tips that will make your games better from a let's see, what would you call it, an umpire perspective. See here, I'm going to put myself up here. That way you can see me and the table and so on, and you can kind of see what's going on the YouTube side. That way nobody kind of gets cheated. You get both the um, everything here. One of the problems that we've run into is the way that you can either watch the podcast on YouTube or you can come here on Discord. Discord allows participation, whereas YouTube, the participation is by text only and it's delayed. I am getting pretty serious about ordering StreamYard, which is a podcasting software that I do in fact know how to use, and I think I'm going to go ahead and probably order that pretty soon. No later than January. I might go ahead and get it even sooner. And I'm trying to figure out the multi-tenant aspect. I believe I can have two other tenants, and that means I can have two other people who can use the account to log in and podcast. What I don't know is if I can create a generic account and just let anybody use that generic account, or if I have to, if it's linked to like an IP address or whatever. We'll get that sorted and figured out soon. But let's go ahead and get on with today's topic of the day, which is 7 ways to make your games better. And let me see here. I do have a number of people in the audience, and I'm just going to go ahead and send out invites. The reason being, I want everybody here to feel welcome to speak. You are welcome to come up on stage, even if you do not wish to speak. But at least if you're on stage, you have that option available to you. We've got KB and Lord Hugs up here. I've also invited La Fondios and Jan Heinemann, all who have quite a bit of expertise in the IKS and can lend their knowledge. All right, let's go ahead and begin. The first tip that I have has to do with ratio, and I have been a fond proponent of a good player to umpire ratio. This is something I actually learned from the little Gaddiston group. And basically, what they taught me a very long time ago was that if you have a 1-to-1 player to umpire ratio, that should be your goal. And what it means is you'll be able to move the game along quite a bit faster, because instead of an umpire having to go like they normally do in our games, to one person provide a report, go to the next person, provide a report, and they may do this 4 to 6 times. And then they come back to person number one and they obtain orders, and they go to person number two and they get orders, and they go to person number 3 and 4 and get orders. And then they come to the umpire map, and one of the problems is by the time they get to the umpire map, they've forgotten what orders, number one are, or they've forgotten some key detail. Now, I encourage umpires quite strongly to write on the map, get out here onto this map and draw on it so that the orders are properly captured. And I have my own whole little shorthand, here's to, advance or march or whatever. Here is, basically a nice big attack. Here's to fall back or retreat. I draw like a squiggly line and an arrow. Here's to march to this position and hold. Here's to defend, whatever. I have my own little shorthand that I use when the players give me orders, and I record those. But the thing is, regardless of whether you follow this procedure for capturing player orders, you still have to go from player to player to player, and that takes time. And you figure at least each player is going to take a minimum of 2 minutes. A minute for the report, a minute for the orders, roughly. Often players will actually take longer because they'll have questions for you. They'll ask, did my dispatch go out? What do I know about this? Can I see something over here? Is there something else going on? And after you get through with the questions and answers and stuff, you're down 2 to 4 minutes. And then if you have to repeat that 3 times, you're looking at a 15-minute turn cycle just for you to get back and then resolve the turn. So you're looking at 15 minutes. Just one umpire to 3 players, 15-minute turn cycle. If you add another player to the mix, you might as well just add another 5 onto that. Again, 2 minutes for the report, 2 minutes for the orders, and then another minute or 2 to resolve everything on the umpire map. And that's assuming you haven't messed up. And the problem with messing up is the player's going to call you on it, and you're going to spend 2 or 3 more minutes making answers and apologetics for the error. So you've got all of that going on. So the closer you are to a 1-to-1 player to umpire ratio, the better off you are. Now, in a discussion that we had the week prior, it was mentioned quite accurately that a 1-to-1 umpire ratio does not necessarily equal, look at that, look at how I draw there. See, I told you I had poor handwriting. Does not necessarily equal a faster game, okay? So we'll just do it like that, right? It's not necessarily greater than, it's not necessarily better. And that's true, When I make these comments, I'm offering them ceteris paribus, which is this cool Latin phrase that means all things being equal. And if all things are equal, it stands to reason that the closer to the 1-to-1 umpire-player ratio you have, the better it's going to be. But if for some reason you have players and umpires who are inexperienced, or there is some other what we would call snafu, which means situation normal, all fudged up. Remember, Kriegsspiel is the land of fudge. Then, yeah, of course, it's not necessarily always going to translate. So caveats aside, though, in general, if all things are equal, it should translate into a faster game. Okay, let me go back to my Discord here and see if there's anybody else. See, I'm sharing my screen, and I have to kind of bounce back and forth. And I want you folks to feel welcome to interrupt me. It's not rude if you interrupt me. If you have good and important things to say and contribute, go ahead.
Break.
Yep, go ahead, Jan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a quick note that I think is worth pointing out, that originally Kriegsspiel would be played as a as a live game experience, right? So let's think of
Hmm.
Reiswitz or Chischwitz with their 2-minute turns.
Who are those
Um,
guys? Who are they?
yeah, I've never heard of them, right? So they wouldn't go to the players every 2 minutes
Hmm.
and give them a report, right? They would have, and that's sort of aligns to your point, though. They would have one assistant umpire per player or team if they run it as a staff exercise, and
Hmm.
they would be constantly moving the pieces on the map no matter what, right? When they get the written orders coming in, and then they apply the delays, and then they keep moving and doing stuff on behalf of the commanders. Um, and on top of that, on top of having the one-to-one for the players slash teams, you then have the master umpire, one or two, who keep an eye on everything, make sure that everything stays synchronized, keep an eye on combat roles and interpretation of the situation and so forth. So yeah, I agree. Even though we are sort of running a turn-based Kriegsspiel version mostly, I do agree on the point.
Fantastic. All right. So I do believe that we've just made history. Jan and I have, in fact, agreed on something for the first time in 3 years of IKS history. So we'll make sure we note that in the Wikipedia entry. All right.
I
um,
would also like to say, like, you can get away with that ratio a bit easier with play by posts. I
oh, yeah.
feel like because
Yeah.
you have
Play
a
by
lot more
post is
time
different.
to manage
Yep.
that.
Yeah. Play by post, where, I mean, you can have one umpire do everything. As long as you have enough time between the turns. So if you tell players, for example, every Sunday evening your turn is due, and then sometime between Sunday evening and the following whatever, the next week or whatever, I, as the umpire, and I might be the only umpire, and I might have 50 players, which is ridiculous, but I might do that to myself because I hate myself for something. And I could take time and do all of those if I'm disciplined and get them all out, and then say, okay, there's the week for the update. Now the next week is for you to, collaborate, review, think, and give your orders. Yeah, there's lots of ways to do that. So play by post, this doesn't necessarily apply, which is a very good point to make here. Although even with play by post, you do want assistant umpires. Just as I'm planning this feudal Japan game, we definitely want lots of assistant umpires, because if we don't have assistant umpires, then we're gonna be buried in work. Okay, let's get to the next point here. And in fact, I kind of need to pick up the pace a little bit because I've got a lot going on today. But the next one is the briefing, and this is one where Otto, who is one of our unofficial master umpires, he's always bucked the official process, but Otto is actually very good at what he does. Otto has put together a guide in the IKS for how to prepare briefings. In fact, I think I can pull some of this up. Let me go to our website and our resources page. We may have it there. I do know that we have content from Otto here. Let's see here. Guide to Kriegsspiel. No, that's not it. The Ottovsky system right here. And it's incorrectly called Ottovsky system. This is actually his tips for umpires guide. His actual system, which is a World War II system, as I understand it, is below it. And he's actually prepared also this is his Napoleonic system, but it's called Tips for Umpires or whatever. And again, and that's probably too small on your screen, so I'll blow it up so you folks can see it. Anyway, the point is umpires need to prepare good briefings. And if you take a look at one of Otto's briefings, these things go on for pages. It's like reading a whole book. He'll have a complete order of battle in there. He'll have a complete description of each unit and its capabilities and what it does. All of these things, not to mention the background, the maps, and so on. The better the briefing you have that you give to the players, then the better the players will be able to prepare, and the better they will be able to run their game. And that just means a smoother experience for everyone, because people get in there and they know exactly what they're doing. case in point here. Last Thursday, I played in James's Among Us Kriegsspiel game, and I didn't know what was going on. And this is actually the second time that's happened. James gets in there, and he tends to run his games with the same groups of people. And he starts the game, and for the past couple of weeks that I've played, I've just been filling in. And so I get slotted in somewhere, and I've got maybe 5 or 10 minutes to figure everything out and where the heck I am and what's going on. And I'll get to the point where I'm like, oh, there's my order of battle. Here's roughly where I am on the map, but I still don't know the plan. And he'll come to me and be like, all right, what are your orders? And I'm just like, hey, I played enough Kriegsspiel. I can kind of, wing it. But then I find myself giving orders and I'm still uncertain. The briefing has to happen up front and center, and it has to be good. It doesn't have to necessarily be long, but I have to be up on the briefing before the game starts. And if I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, I need to know what my order of battle is. I need to know my location on the map. I need to know my chain of command, who's above me, below me, who my peers are. And I need to know what we're doing. It's good also if I have some idea of the problem, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But if I know those things, then I can take to it like a duck to water. Even a new player will at least have their bearings straight, even if they're uncertain of themselves and they don't know what they're doing. So you have to have a briefing. Some of the worst, most disastrous experiences I have ever hosted myself has been where I say, here's the red team in one corner, and here's the blue team in another corner, and here's an objective, now go at it. And the player's like, what do I do now? So you definitely want to make sure you give the players a good briefing. All right. Again, feel free to interrupt if you have something you'd like to contribute. All right. On the problem. Kriegsspiel is about solving problems, and if you are familiar, there was some guy named von Moltke or whatever, right? Who knows who he was, right? But he wrote basically a book of problems, and in fact, if you take a look at our IKS store, let's see here. Here we go. I'll just show this to you right here. The picture on our store is, in fact, if it loads, from his very first tactical problem, the Trebets. And I went and I created this map. I stitched it together from, I think, the Arcanum source. But here it is. I created this map because I was going to run everybody through the problems at one point a year or 2 years ago. And then I didn't end up doing it for whatever reason. But I thought it would make a really cool banner. But this is where that little map is from. It's from Moltke's Tactical Problems. Now, here's the deal. Every Kriegsspiel should center on a problem. There should be a problem that you are dealing with that you want to present to the players so they have something to work on, right? Who gives a test without a problem, right? Even if you get a math test, right? Well, if you get a math test and the subject is, fractions or long division, right? Then all the problems on the exam are going to be long divisions, are they not? You're not going to have problems about polynomials and trigonometry and, basic multiplication necessarily when you're trying to assess long division. As a training exercise, the purpose of Kriegsspiel is to either teach or illustrate a certain particular solution or an approach to a problem, or to evaluate that. So you should have something in mind. In other words, it's like there should be a purpose, there should be a plot, there should be a punchline, there should be a point to the exercise. And this is one of the other problems. If you take and you put red in one corner and blue in the other corner and say, here's an objective, now fight. Now look, it works if you want to test a system and the mechanics of a system, but at the end of the day, that's not a particularly complicated or compelling problem for the players. A good player might be something like, hey, you have to attack, but guess what? The defenders outnumber you. How are you going to use terrain to restore the odds to at least even, if not create odds that are in your favor? Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you're defending, but the attackers outnumber you. How are you going to use terrain to balance the scenario or, again, skew the scenario in your favor. In other words, there's a problem there. Maybe you have 2 or 3 objectives that you are expected to achieve, but you do not have the material or the resources to achieve all of them. These are good tactical problems to put to players, and they make scenarios compelling. So for every scenario, you should always have some kind of a problem at the heart of it. Now, there's 2 kinds of problems. There are the problems that you as the umpire create, and then there are the what I call organic problems, and those are problems that the players will create for each other just by naturally maneuvering and operating on the battlefield. The organic problems are always going to develop because players make mistakes and their opponents get a say in what they do. So your opponents are going to try to trip you up and get in your decision loop and all of this other stuff. There's that. But at the end of the day, there has to be a central problem that is set by the umpire. Otherwise, the scenario is going to be far less compelling than it should be. All right. Anybody want to comment on problems? Go ahead, Hugs.
I would also like to point out that these problems can scale up to operational and campaign level games as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, didn't you just run the Civil War, right? Carter's Civil War. I have no idea how many people were involved, like 100 people or something ridiculous.
It was definitely more than 100, I would say.
Yeah, and the thing is he set the historic problems, right? You had the Confederacy, for example, which had the historic problems of manpower, financing, and navy, for example, and they had to solve them. And from my understanding and what my limited participation in the game was, the Confederacy went really deep on the naval side because I think they correctly recognized that if we can take supremacy at sea, then we can cut off the Union, negate a lot of their advantages while enhancing or essentially solving a lot of our problems, such as with supply and other things. Now, you were the president of the Confederacy, Lord Hugs. Am I accurate in that assessment, or did you actually have a different strategy? Because that's just how I perceived it. What was the problem that you saw, and how'd you solve
real quick,
it?
Real quick, just for so we don't spend too much time on this. It was mainly to focus on Navy to keep the ports open as long as possible. Basically, kind of like how France or even Germany in World War One. Well, I guess unsuccessfully, but they tried anyways. Like the fleet and being strategy of like, as long as our fleet was alive, they couldn't spread out and blockade because then we could defeat them in detail. It was kind of the our solution to that problem because our strength lied in imports and exports. So the Navy was a huge factor in our strategy.
Well,
Which just goes to show that like it was a big problem that we had to solve, and we had to get creative with that solution.
And the other thing that it did was it allowed you to take reserves from guarding ports from naval invasions and move those to the front, which solved the manpower problem at the front. So it's very interesting how you figured, here's this one key to a problem. Now, I don't want to get into this. I know this is a sore subject for especially the Union players, and I do have my own. I think I kind of agree with the Union team on this, that this is a little easier for the Confederacy to pull off than it would have been historically. In fact, I think it would have been impossible historically, but that's just for the record. Either way, you correctly identified a problem. You applied a solution, and the umpires agreed with your application, and as a consequence, you enjoyed victory. So there you go. But again, every Kriegsspiel, the heart of every Kriegsspiel should be some kind of a problem. A lot of us take a map-based approach to planning our Kriegsspiel. We look at a map and we're like, oh, wow, that's a really cool map. I want to play with it. I mean, let's take a look here. I've got a cool map. Let's see, where is it? Well, actually, it's right here in Tabletop. Let's open it up real quick just to tease everybody. And here it is. And yeah, here's a cool map, and we're going to do feudal Japan. And we've created this relatively high resolution map, relatively speaking, and we're going to use this for our feudal Japan. This is going to be the campaign map for the umpires, so that we can plot movements and stuff and determine where battles occur. But yeah, a lot of Kriegsspiels start with a map, but a map is not a problem. And just because you have a really cool looking map doesn't mean that you're going to have a really compelling scenario. Again, you have to have some kind of a problem that you put to the players to make the scenario compelling. All right, let's take a look. The next thing I was going to talk about was maps. And specifically when it comes to maps, and this kind of brings me back to some of these other things, is let me actually go to.
May I interrupt briefly and
Yes.
suggest that people check out Umpire Lafondiose's YouTube channel if they want to familiarize them with Moltke's problems, because he's an awesome channel presenting them there. So
Let me pull that up because
And
I want
they're
to
also
share that.
short, which I appreciate. It's very straight to the point, which I love, and very well put together.
Thanks very much. I just created a playlist that is just the Mulkey problems, so you can run through them.
Okay, hang on here. I am. Well, unfortunately, I don't know how to spell, so I actually am a really good speller, but I make a lot of typos. Here we are. Okay, I'm going to show everybody your channel, La Fondios. If you want to talk people through or guide me through it, give people a quick tour, and let's talk briefly about what you offer. Go ahead, please.
Well, thanks. I just I put together videos on mostly after action reviews and then some tactical concepts. And so the Mulkey problems, I tried to. The problem with the Mulkey problems is, one, they use old German city names, so when you just read it, it's kind of hard to follow. And there's a lot of extra stuff in there. So I try to boil it down to a 3-minute video that says, here's the problem and the solution that they presented.
Mm-hmm. Now, I noticed that I'm looking at this, and you got 52, 11, 25, 7, and 61. Now, I'm not very good at counting, but you don't have these 1 through, you didn't start at Aardvark and go to Zebra. Is there a reason?
I'm choosing I chose an offensive one, a defensive one. I'm trying to create some variety, and a lot of the problems actually are missing. If you read the book, they don't have either the solution or the problem. So
Yeah.
I was searching for variety first and then filling it in from there.
Perfect. Okay, well, there you go. All right, Kriegsspiel Umpire La Fondios, and you can hop in here and make sure you hit that subscribe button and check out what he has again. I do appreciate, likewise, the short duration of the videos, so these are outstanding for anybody who wants to become familiar with what we do here. Okay, let's continue here. We're talking about maps. So on the topic of maps, I guess all I would say is the players are going to be looking at the map all day long. So you want to make sure that whatever map the players end up looking at, that it is not, really boring. It should be something interesting for them to look at. This is particularly true in a live game, but it's also true online. You want to have nice maps. Actually, I was in Tabletop Simulator, right? Because I wanted to show off some maps. And actually, let's just pull something up here. Here is here's Quatre Bras. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it. I don't know who did this one. Let's take a look at some others. Oh, goodness. We've had some really cool maps, though. Oh, this is one of my favorites, was the Irish one. I did this one, Easter Rising Actual. Let's see here. And, yeah, you see the markings where I did the deployments for all of the units and stuff. And if you zoom in, you can actually see the units and the pieces, which brings you to the next thing, which are the pieces. So I think we can handle both of these together. But you need the pieces and the units to look compelling and interesting to the players, again, because they will be spending all day looking at these pieces, and you don't want them to be bored. And it's just, it's a feast for the eyes to have cool pieces and everything else on the map. So I definitely want to encourage people to spend time developing these assets for their games. So there's that. Okay.
One thing.
Go ahead.
One thing to add on to that real quick, from a player perspective, there have been a few games where actually large groups of players are not giving a map purposely But when you do that as an umpire, it's important to make it compelling, like textually, describing what's going on, just so you can fill in for the absence of a map.
Right. Yep, that's true. And again, sometimes the absence of a map and pieces and so on could be one of the problems that you're trying to pitch to the players. For example, what do you do? Let's say you're in a command tent, you're behind the line, you can't view the battlefield with your own eyes, you have to work entirely through written reports. One of the cool things about Kriegsspiel is Kriegsspiel was ultimately, or originally I should say, an exercise about writing clear and concise orders. And that's because, again, especially in the Napoleonic Wars, a lot of times your commander has no eyes on the battlefield. And even if they have eyes on the battlefield, it's obscured by smoke, it's obscured by distance and other things. There's all sorts of stuff that's going on. And as battles get bigger and bigger, you're lucky if you have a map. And even if you have a map, the map does not necessarily have the detail. The bigger the battle is, the bigger your map's going to be in terms of size or scale, but then you're going to lack that detail that you need. So it's not like solving a tactical matter where, here's a structure, here's, an orchard or whatever, and I think if we maneuver through the orchard, we can outflank the structure and attack. It's not like that when you're looking at this big strategic map. Even on the Mets map, it's really kind of hard to get that granular with your level of detail, nor is it really your problem as a commander. But the fact is, if you are communicating through dispatches, if I'm getting a dispatch from somebody on the outskirts of Metz and I'm clear back in my favorite place called Prayel, I can't see Metz to save my life. So I'm relying on a written dispatch. What do I do with that? Where do I move the little piece on the map if I even have a map at all? That's a problem. And I think that's a good exercise to put players through. So you're right. You don't always have to have a map. I like to give players a map, especially if they're new or starting and they're going to be staring at that all day. But you are absolutely correct. If you want to do a Kriegsspiel that really messes with the head, don't give them a map at all and then see what happens. That's a compelling way to play. But I will also say this. If you're going to play without a map or pieces, if it's just going to be this mental exercise where they are looking at a table and maybe they have note paper and maybe they're getting dispatches, but that's all they're going to see, you do want it to move pretty quick. Because if they're sitting here and they're just looking at a blank desk for hours and hours, they're going to get bored and they're going to fall asleep on you or something. So do keep that in mind. Remember, we play for entertainment in the IKS, but it is important that we give people compelling and interesting problems. All right.
One fun fact.
Go ahead, Jan.
The original Kriegsspiel maps were 1 to 8,000, and that is because in the 1820s, that's basically the time where maps slowly become available. So Kriegsspiel is not only an exercise on writing orders, but it is also to familiarize young staff officers with how to read a map, because they don't know how to read a map, how to read a tactical map, that is.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting point technology-wise, which I think is often overlooked nowadays. It's like putting a smartphone in the hand of someone from the 1970s and then tell them, well, now use this thing to get to somewhere.
The 1970s? I'm from the 1970s.
There you go.
Also, the 1812, Reeswitz Sr., his maps were just porcelain tiles. Wooden tiles I've seen even in some of the pictures. And they are not very pretty. But I guess they get the job done. But those could be tessellated. Those could be rearranged. Okay, last 2 points here, and the first one is business only. When we interact with our players in the Kriegsspiel, and when we're giving our reports and we are taking orders, the more we keep it to business only, the better and more efficient the game is going to proceed. Now, I am a chief violator of this. Watch any game that I play. You pop in, it's comedy hour with me. But I wouldn't be upset if an umpire cracked down on that and said, no, 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 here's the report, what are your orders? You know, or if you even limited the amount of time that a person has to give orders. In the feudal Japan game, I don't know what limitations I have in this scenario, but I'm thinking of putting a really long delay on the play-by-post orders so that once you hit enter, that's it, you're done. You're done until the next turn. I have to talk to the umpire team if they want to approach it that way, but I really want to get these players to think very carefully about their orders and submit their orders very carefully. So
there's a way to metagame that, in that you can actually edit the message itself when you submit it. And I have found myself doing that a few times.
Mm-hmm. I know, but that's okay. You know, at the end of the day, it will impress upon most players that you're not going to be able to just add and add and add. You have to do all of your thinking up front and then whatever. And there may be other ways to deal with that, such as limit there'll be a window of time in which you could submit the orders or whatever, or submit them by email. I might do it that way as well, that I'm going to have an email inbox instead of a Discord inbox. So there's different ways that I can do this. So at the end of the day, though, keeping it limited to business only and not making a lot of conversation about cars or airplanes or other conflicts or whatever's in the news or whatever celebrities are doing or personal stuff. You need to eliminate that side discussion that's not part of the game as much as possible to keep the game moving as quickly as you can. The last thing go ahead.
As we're speaking, Felix has just released a new iteration of the dispatch bot, which now allows to limit the characters in the message.
Well, there you go. There you go. That's great. So Felix's dispatch bot has now been updated. And what's the character limit? Is it whatever you set, or did he set it to something?
So it comes naturally with the 2,000 character Discord limit, and then you can set it to whatever number below that.
Nice. Very nice. All right. Okay, the last thing I'm going to say is the critique. The critique is critical because at the end of every scenario, you should be giving the players the problem and then, of course, the solution to the problem so that they know that there is a solution to the problem. Now, what if the problem's the Kobayashi Maru? Well, if the problem is the Kobayashi Maru, which you guys all know is this no-win scenario, the problem isn't what you think the problem is. The problem isn't that I have to rescue the people on this dying starship, and here comes the Klingons, and it's in the neutral zone. What do I do? That wasn't the problem at all. The problem is, what do I do? How do I respond as a commander to a no-win situation? But of course, you're going to end up with commanders who don't even grasp the problem. And so the critique is your opportunity to deal with this. It's to talk to them and say, well, the actual problem was this. You identified the problem as this, but it was actually this. Or maybe the player correctly identified the problem, but they applied the wrong solution. For example, the problem is when do you commit your cuirassiers, which are heavy cavalry? They are the arm of decision. And what you did was you used your cuirassiers to scout, and then you used them to immediately attack the enemy as soon as you saw him. So instead of holding these critical elements in reserve, you did not use them correctly. So there would be a critique, right? You would critique that. Now, the one thing I will also say is when you give a critique, you should always find something positive to say to the student or the player prior to giving some kind of critical feedback. So you might say something, and it might be really generic because there's not a whole lot that you can say sometimes. Sometimes players, like, I don't know, I'll change the name to protect the innocent. Sometimes a player like Jan Heinemann, which is a name that's changed, and Marshall Neal has changed to Jan Heinemann to protect him, would do this thing where everything they do is completely wrong. And in fact, so much so it becomes a meme. And if that happens, what do you say to a player that's nice? Well, you might say, look, hey, you showed up, you got in there, you sent your orders or your dispatches in a timely fashion at least, basically the equivalent of you tried. And that's okay because especially for new players, it's very intimidating to get in and try. But if they're out there and they're doing that, then hey, you want to praise that. So whatever you can find to praise on something that they did, you want to start with that and then move into the critique. And then, of course, one of the things that helps to sugar the pill is sometimes you give the student an excuse. You probably really didn't know that this was going to happen, or it was really hard for you to see that this was the situation. Now, that may or may not be true, but at the end of the day, you want the players to return. You want them to play again. You want them to take the lesson and actually reflect upon it and then incorporate that in a future play. And if you are so hard on them, if you yell at them and scream at them like you're some kind of an angry drill sergeant or something, then they're not going to want to come back and play. So you don't want to create pain during the critique. You want to create some sense of closure, some sort of, oh, aha, oh, wow, now I want to try it again. Haven't you ever done that where you did something and you messed it up and then somebody taught you something and you immediately wanted to go back and repeat the exercise so you could see if you wanted to demonstrate even, hey, look, okay, I get it. I learned it now. Now it goes click. And you get really excited about that. That's the sensation you want to create when delivering the critique. So if you can go ahead.
I would point out, being the receiving of critique and also like giving out quite a bit myself for a while. We have to be careful when giving out critique to players from looking at it too much from hindsight point of view. You have to like really dive into the situation of what that person was aware of at the time to give good critique.
Yeah, you need a lot of empathy because a lot of times players can get blasted for things that they had no way of knowing. And I've seen that happen. I've been on the receiving end of that. It's not fun. It's not pleasant. You feel like you're a big idiot, but at the same time, you're like, how could I have known? So you have to acknowledge that as an umpire when making your critiques of the players. So that's very important. That's very good feedback, Hugs. Very good. So that's all I have for today. We've gone for 45 minutes. We have a big powwow here in 15. Does anybody want to ask any questions or add anything to the discussion? No? All right. Well, then that's all we have for today. This has been our Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I want to thank everybody for showing up and being here to learn about how to make your Kriegsspiel better. Be sure to share the stream with your family, friends, neighbors, and I don't know, whoever you can force to watch, right? Or don't. It doesn't matter. But anyway, thanks for being here.
We like our thumbs.
Right? We like our thumbs. There you go. And we will see you on our next adventure. Goodbye for now.